I'm Billy S, welcome back to the channel. Today we're ranking the areas of Wuchang Fallen Feathers. This is one of the few games to come really close to the Dark Souls standard of level design and interconnectivity, so I'm excited to talk about it. If you're interested in the bosses though, I did a boss ranking of Wuchang Fallen Feathers the other week, feel free to check that out. I had to get a bit creative with some of the regions in this game though, and how to split them up for this video's entries, but I'm satisfied with what we eventually came up with. So be sure to parry that subscribe button, we're almost at 40,000 subscribers, oh my god I'm so excited. And let's jump in with... At number 14 we have Hills Watch, the opening area of the second chapter of the game. You have to cross through this ramshackle village on the way to the snowy peaks of Cloudspire, but when we arrive it's completely deserted. There are a handful of areas in Wuchang that are merely there to ferry you between regions, and Hills Watch is one of them. There are no bosses to fight, the level design is fairly linear and straightforward, but I do enjoy the atmosphere. There are a handful of tough enemies to face, such as this body collector, who you can kill for a coral bracelet that you can hand into an NPC at the start of Hills Watch for some rewards. As you progress, you also run into multiple NPCs whose questlines you can work on, and you'll fight a few bandits further up the path before reaching the end of the area. There are some peasants that you cannot attack in this last portion due to Wuchang's censorship update. Certain enemy types were made non-hostile for the sake of historical accuracy. It doesn't really affect this part of the game, but a later area we'll talk about is heavily affected by those changes. At number 13, we have the Battlefield Pass, the opening area of the third chapter of the game. Similarly to our last entry, Battlefield Pass is designed to introduce you to Mount Zhenwu, featuring a mysterious cavern that you have to progress through, followed by a war-torn village complete with a lovely lake of blood. The main gimmick of this short area is an enemy type that is able to summon spirits to attack you. These guys wield banners, and the only way to stop these ghostly apparitions from respawning is to defeat the banner bearers. I think this is a neat gimmick for such a quick area, making the sequence feel a little memorable as you keep moving to avoid getting overrun by the various mobs. There are a handful of treasures to find, a few bird demons to fight that can prove deadly if you're not careful, and the pass eventually leads down to the refugee camp, which I'll include in this entry. It's where all your NPCs migrate to after Chapter 2, assuming you went to Cloudspire and did everything there first. It also becomes your hub for the rest of this area, albeit I think the camp itself is a bit of a mess to navigate, and finding specific NPCs can be a pain. I think this transitional area works better than Hills Watch purely because the enemies have a decent gimmick, but it's still just a transitional area, so it can't land any higher. At number 12, we have the Ferry Outlook and Bai Mansion, two areas I've stuck together in the ranking because they're effectively the same zone. The Ferry Outlook starts with a large cavern you have to explore behind Zhenwu Temple, complete with all the enemy types you're used to facing at this point. When you emerge though, you find yourself at a dock by a vast lake. You can meet with certain NPCs here, finishing various quest lines, before taking a boat to the other side of the river. This gets you to the Bai Mansion, which is your childhood home. It's a small area, featuring the mansion itself and a cavern leading to the Bai Crew boss arena, but it's the story of the zone that allows it to rank higher than the two transitional areas before it. I really like that as the player, we don't really know this place, which mirrors Wuchang in-game when she arrives, as due to the feathering disease, she has been losing her memories and thus she may not remember it either. It's crazy that this fairly important to the main character's story location is completely missable though. If you talk to the storyteller after the boss against the tiger, you can lock yourself out of exploring the Overlook and the mansion. I still think that's one element of this game that deserves critique, to be honest. But that's enough of these transitional zones, let's get into the meat now with... At number 11, we have the Tang Emperor's Palace, the final area of Chapter 1. We emerge in the back of the palace, having snuck in via Willow Beach, and it is overrun with soldiers that we need to fight through. We're looking for an ancient treasure that could potentially help with the feathering and Wuchang's own personal goals. The enemies are fairly tough, wielding stronger weapons, shields, and having more HP as a result. Progress revolves around circling a large inner pond, with the goal being to drain the water to access what lies beneath. Because of this, the level design of the palace doesn't really go anywhere. This is a very flat area where you're making a lot of horizontal progress, but lacking the verticality that most of Wuchang's areas specialize in. almost like the game wants you to get through this palace as quickly as possible so you can get back to the larger world at hand. There's an ambush by one of the maids near the end, which is a funny boss surprise. There's a locked door that remains a mystery for the foreseeable future, and ultimately you end up getting to the boss with relative ease. I think the journey to the palace itself is the more interesting part of Chapter 1, and now that we're here, you just kinda want to beat Honglan and get out. At number 10, we have Cloudspire City, the third area of Chapter 2, which features us exploring the mountain fortress of Cloudspire as we venture up towards the palace, ending in a confrontation against the mistress of the fortress herself. I normally like snowy mountain levels, so I was kinda surprised to find that Cloudspire City wasn't really my cup of tea. The enemy designs are fairly fun. I like the empowered palace servants that play music who can ambush you if you're not careful, and I like that we have multiple different enemy types to work with here. My problem, ironically, comes from the level design. A lot of Cloudspire City is spent climbing ladders, going upstairs, and crossing these bridges that connect housing complexes. It's like a maze, except even more difficult because every room looks the same. The path leading to the street with the Great Gondor Gang had me so confused because I was going up, down, left, right, across bridges. I kept getting lost. Death by gravity sucks here, and there were a few moments where I got ambushed by attacks I couldn't have predicted, leading to a quick death and a long run back. Then you reach the palace itself, and if you decide to ignore the main structure, you can accidentally trigger the area boss because she's chilling on a side path of all things, which gets a lot of your characters killed. The whole wedding dress subplot will go down in infamy as one of my least favorites in the game, purely because it's so easy to mess up. I actually liked the palace itself. Tough enemies, a really cool secret treasure room with a demon invasion, and the panda merchant. But losing that questline really soured me on Cloudspire City, and certain parts of the level grew very tedious every time I had to redo them, such as this market area with all of the fucking gunmen. I explored it once on my first pass, then I went down there again after meeting the Gondor gang thinking I'd be able to interact with Glug, only for me to find out I needed to talk with the kids again before going down to get Glug, so I had to repeat what I just did 3 times because I hadn't got a specific questline trigger. And then the quest ended in failure anyway, so my suffering was for naught. 10th place. At number 9, we have the Mercury Workshop, the second area of Chapter 1. Unlocking the hidden path beneath Shoe Sanctum, this workshop is a fetid, corrupted slice of vertical level design, where the ultimate goal is to make it to the bottom. It reveals the dark underbelly of the healing promised by Shoe Sanctum and makes you wonder, maybe the priests were a little cray-cray. The gimmick of this area is that almost everything inflicts corruption on you, this game's version of the regular poison status. From toxic clouds that you need to walk between, to the various insectoid enemies who have no qualms with inflicting you with diseases, it's disgusting. Accompanied by the fleshy tones of the central pillar and some of the platforms you explore as well. What I love about the Mercury Workshop is how many branching paths there are. You'll often find yourself being dropped from a breakable ledge onto an optional path, which, if you follow, will get you good items before leaving you right where you fell. That wraparound level design works extremely well, and as you descend, you unlock elevator shortcuts for good measure, so you're always making a modicum of progress. I think the most harrowing enemies are these attached to the pillars. They emit a piercing scream that can stun you unless you discover the Draco Lich pendant on a hidden path near the start of this area, rewarding exploration at its finest. I did find myself a little worn down on the final floor though, so I was grateful when the level transitioned to the Bandits Cave sub-area and the boss beyond. And the tower after the boss, which leads up to Doomwillow Beach, was surprisingly fun to explore too. Love the verticality there. Speaking of the beach, at number 8, we have Doomwillow Beach, the third area of Chapter 1. In order to infiltrate the Tang Palace, we have to find the back entrance hidden here in Doomwillow Beach. But there's no sun, sand, and sea to greet you here. Doomwillow Beach is a region that has been burned away by a series of fires. This was where the corpses of all those lost to the feathering and illness were tossed, making the area extremely hazardous to traverse. creatures lurk in the poisonous waters, and further in, the very trees themselves are out to get you. I really love the enemy designs here, which get steadily more messed up the further in you go. The one that remains the most memorable for me is the corrupted horse that you fight towards the end. Not for any gameplay reason, but just how disturbing I found the design of the creature. There's a thick smog coating the entire beach, aside from a singular red glow that you can follow to its source to find the Bow Magus. Turns out things are incredibly fucked here. This is also the first location in the game to feature a Mimic checkpoint. We've always wondered whether FromSoft would do a Mimic bonfire, and now I know how it feels. Wasn't expecting it in the slightest, which made the surprise all the more enjoyable. I also like that this area has an optional upper location with a burned down mansion, which highlights the lore of a previous boss encounter, Liu Hongliu, though you can check out my boss ranking for more info there. Honestly, my main complaint with Doom Willow Beach is that I wish the area was a tad bit longer, or had just a little more in the way of enemy design to really help it cross the threshold from a solid area to a fantastic area. And hey, this is actually one of the few areas to continue after the boss fight, as you have to cross a mountain pass to reach the Tang Palace. And because the atmosphere is still smoggy as fuck, it's definitely still a part of Doom Willow. At number 7, we have Worship's Rise in Ruins, the 4th chapter of the game. After a certain point in the story, the first region of the game is occupied by enemy forces and burned to the ground. And while not the entire town is explorable, with many of the paths you took during Chapter 1 being cut off, a large portion remains. You can double back to the Tang Palace and beyond, you can go to the Reverend Temple to figure out what's going on, several character quests come to an end here, and in classic Souls-like fashion, they're not really that happy. I love that this area asks you to remember the muscle memory from your previous exploration of Worship's Rise, but now you have to figure out how to navigate while everything is burning around you. The avian enemies are more frequent, with you needing to either fight or dash through various encounters to progress. I really like the side path through the palace that eventually takes you back down to Doom Willow Beach and further still to the depths of the Mercury Workshop. Returning down the path we covered in the last few entries, we have to deal with the Bow Magus attempting to snipe us from afar, followed by a battle against Vermilion Feathers Honglan, and then the Magus herself soon after. There's the Nightmare Demon encounter for players who want to test the equivalent of PvP skills, and the burning cave that eventually leads to the Dragon Emperor, with some of the toughest enemies guarding the arena. But why this area lands at number 7 and not higher, despite the brilliant story connotations, is pretty simple. 1, it uses the same layouts as Worship's Rise, but doesn't end up being as fun because it's a more linear experience with less of the interconnectivity, and more of just having 2 to 3 branching paths that lead to their respective ends. 2, the censorship of Wuchang hits in full force, as many of the soldiers who help you fight the birds here were originally killable. This meant the difficulty of the area was pretty tough at launch, but with the changes made, the difficulty balancing of the Worship's Rise in Ruins is now completely off-kilter. It's way easier than it should be, and I think it affects the area's quality as well as the story. You are afflicted with the feathering, and it's explained at the game's beginning that people will attack you on sight for fearing you are a monster. All of these soldiers suddenly ignoring you, it takes you out of the experience a little bit, which is a real shame. At number 6, we have the Mercury Mines, the 4th area of the 2nd chapter, though it's actually just called Shaft in-game, but that is a horrendous name, so I changed it. Anyway, welcome to Wuchang's version of Sen's Fortress. We have walking across precarious bitches. We have walking across precarious bridges with swinging pendulums looking to knock you down. We have horrendous tortured monsters that want to kill you. We have boulder traps that may or may not hurt a lot when you get hit. We have a primarily vertical level, except this one sees you going deeper and deeper into the mines. Is this area a bit of a rehash of the Mercury Workshop from earlier in the video? Yes, but it does the concept a lot better, so I'm willing to give it more grace. Shortcuts are few and far between, forcing you to play very carefully as you learn the various new enemy types. I especially found the giant hook-wielding divas and their penchant for poise breaking to be especially difficult, though my most infamous encounter was this spider-like enemy deep in the zone, which kept killing me and forcing me to do a massive run back just to reach him again and die. And during that run back, I kept getting grabbed by this basic prisoner lady and it caused me to full-on mentally crash out. Special shoutouts go to all the pots everywhere that when they break send an orb of poison to home in on your location. I despise that feature in Dark Souls 3's Catacombs of Carthus, and I still don't like it here, but it makes thematic sense so I can't be too mad. I do like the juxtaposition between the upper half of the mines, featuring horrors beyond your comprehension, and the last part of the mines, which are populated by the female servants who fight with a lot more grace. Petals litter the floor, leading directly to the bridge you drop off to reach the arena boss. But the path is also littered with corpses, as if to show this is not a good place. You can also rescue Honglan from prison here. She'll escape on her own if you don't help her, and I don't think it changes any interactions, but if you want to be nice, you will get an amulet for it. My favourite part of this level is just the exploration though. There are a lot of different paths, many of which lead to dead ends with good loot, but every branch will eventually reconnect and keep you pushing downwards. However, it does lose some points for coming right after Cloudspire City and Outskirts, which are fun levels, but very draining. I thought after reaching the shaft, oh god, this area continues on, as opposed to, ooh, a new area. And I think that is a valid metric for why I think Chapter 2's a bit rough in its pacing. At number 5, we have the Bow Capital, the final area of the game. This encompasses Chapter 5, where you have fallen into the ruins of the bow, and your final journey is at hand. One thing I will immediately praise the Bow Capital for though is that it truly captures the vibe of a final dungeon. The floor is lined with infected blood that bubbles and boils, while the enemies here are some of the most ferocious in the entire game. We've got the avian bow people trying to kill us, alongside gargantuan stone golems that animate to attack you with electricity, zombified husks that shamble towards you in vast numbers, and most deadly of all for me, these divalicious girlies who teleport and slice with precision. No matter when I fought them, they would always cause a lot of pain for me, and multiple deaths. As for the area, it's split into two halves. The first sees you climbing up various cliff paths to find elevators that lead to new zones, also you can eventually unlock a vast doorway that leads to the second half of the capital. It's a maze, one that I don't think I saw the full breadth of during my playthrough if I'm being honest, but I did find the panda room, and that's more important than anything else in the game. There's also a special doorway that quizzes you, and you have to answer incorrectly to have the chance to face the Demon of Obsession boss fight, which you need to beat to obtain either of the two best endings. Though whether the demon is the boss fight or the divalicious girly right after is the boss fight is up to you. The second half of the capital sees you needing to activate a series of switches in an open area which will allow you to progress to the final boss. This part though, I think we could have done without. Hot take, but it made the Bow Capital drag on slightly longer than it needed to be. By the time I reached the storyteller and met with one of my companions for the final time, I was ready for the area to end. The dialogue for the NPCs here gave Wuchang a sense of finality, but then this extra area made me want to just rush through it so I could actually reach that final fight, that denouement. Pacing is not really Wuchang's strong suit as a game, and while I know some will say they're glad for the extra area to keep playing such an amazing game, I'm more of a less is sometimes more kind of guy. Still, Bow Capital ends up being one of the more striking final areas in a Soulslike, and I love how they nailed the sense of finality, even if I have no fucking clue what is going on in the final part of the story or what our goal really is by the time we reach the final boss. Gonna go watch some lore videos, BRB. At number 4, we have Cloudspire Outskirts, the second area of Chapter 2. Of the Cloudspire portion of the game, this is definitely the best the zone has to offer. We have a vast array of smaller areas that make up the full region, but I decided to lump them all together because they all unify under one main boss fight, Ainanchi. What I love though is that you have multiple paths through the outskirts and all of them are valid. Whether you want to head up through the ramshackled villages, complete with horrifying effigies that resurrect countless monstrosities to hound you, and a militia hell-bent on sniping you from afar if you're within range, or whether you'd rather dive into a hidden series of mining caves where the elders of Cloudspire are left to rot, both of these paths will eventually lead you to the rebel camp atop the cliffs. Here, you have to take down soldiers to get the key to the boss arena, but it's easier said than done. There are so many enemies to fight through, it puts you to the test from the get-go. But what I love about the Outskirts is the level design here. When you first arrive, you're overwhelmed by the amount of choice in which paths you can take, but the developers skillfully weave every area into each other, with shortcuts that connect all the important zones together through a series of mining tunnels. Exploration is rewarded and just feels good for the player. Then, once the boss is down, you have a series of towers you can climb with flames that need to be lit. Doing this will also deal with the horrifying effigies in town, and can eventually cause the bridge to Cloudspire to lower. Despite taking a few hours to fully explore this region, I kept finding new things on each path I took, to the point where I was genuinely in awe at the level design. Hell, I even love the way they handled frostbite due to the colder climate. I usually dislike status effects. Frostbite always builds when you're in the shade, but dissipates when you're in the sun, so you can carefully progress through the sunny zones, or you can drink warm soup that stops passive frostbite for a long while. It was a neat addition. That being said, I just think the last 3 areas in this video stuck with me a little more, feeling more cohesive as a whole. At number 3, we have Zhenwu Temple, the main area of the 3rd chapter. When you think about ancient China, these types of temples are front and center, so I'm glad we get to explore one in Wuchang. The temple has been overtaken by a militia hell-bent on resurrecting their commander, a famous Chinese historical figure who ends up being the area's final boss. They slaughtered the monks of the temple, occupying it in their quest, and as such, we have to now fight through waves upon waves of soldiers as we explore higher and higher. Not to mention a few sneaky bow avians who are surveying the temple from the rooftops. It starts with an enemy encampment, traditional fare that you can fight through relatively easily, before eventually giving way to the main temple. It's designed with a series of towering pagodas that you have to climb up in between to reach the very top, and I really love the sense of progression here, because it's not as simple as go up for progress. No, there are times where you have to descend the main tower to open up shortcuts, leading to the Liu Wenqiu mid-boss that gets you access to the 3rd tower of the temple. You have certain enemies patrolling the higher floors who can inflict an instant death status on you if you're not quick enough to kill them, meaning you need to be stealthy and careful in your approach. There's a hidden cavern past an invisible path that was cute to find, and we have the reappearance of the mimic checkpoints as I got destroyed by this one midway through the level. Clambering across rooftops is great fun, and finding shortcuts that not only lead back to the Zhenwu shrine, but also to the refugee camp nearby was fantastic. Enemies are placed pretty perfectly to create a real sense of challenge from start to finish, and by the time I reached the final boss of the area, I felt satisfied with what I'd overcome. The temple doesn't seem large at first glance, but the intricacies of how you explore gave way to a lengthier area than I first thought, and yet it never felt like a slog. Except for this one enemy who knocked me off a rafter without me having the opportunity to react. They really wanted to recreate Anor Londo, but at what cost? My fucking sanity. At number 2, we have the Avian Marsh, an optional zone explorable in the 3rd chapter. You can find this forest by descending the ladder in the refugee camp and following the white-robed elder, and wow! Who would have guessed the guy that loves Darkroot Garden from Dark Souls or Green Path from Hollow Knight would adore the twisted marshlands and forests of Wuchang? I've always had a thing for forest levels and nature in general, but there's something about gigantic towering trees whose roots span the width of the zone, allowing you to climb them and use them for progression, that has me snapping my fingers with contentment. The color palette is filled with greens and blues, and the scenery is gorgeous from start to finish, especially coming from the dark oranges and bloody reds of Zhenwu. It's such a striking visual change. Exploration is a little more linear than past areas, featuring a progression path that wraps around to 2 different checkpoints through the marshland, but I don't mind that. Shortcuts are well spaced out, never feeling too easy or too tough. A majority of the enemies here focus on the avians, which are also an enemy type I adore, and who can hate the area where you can kill giant clams and then eventually wear one of them as a helmet? The 2 most striking moments of the marsh, though, come in the form of the Despair Cavern and the Tomb. The Despair Cavern is a portion of the level where you need to make your way through a large cave, while a creature attempts to inflict you with the Despair insta-kill debuff. Hiding behind walls and slowly making your way through the tunnels to eventually reach the enemy inflicting the status is a genuine blast. Though it helps that I managed this on my first go, I could see less experienced players finding this segment annoying if they keep dying to the status. Then there's the Tomb, a vast hidden flower field by a gorgeous lake, which just screams boss arena. The white-robed elder can be found here towards the end of his questline, once as an NPC, and then as a hidden boss fight after you've unlocked the Bow Capital. It's easily my favourite boss arena in the entire game, and is an absolutely striking place to just sit and relax in. Though the Bow Sorcerer, who is this area's boss fight, also has a gorgeous pondside arena that I really love the vibe of. Still, the main progression of crossing giant mossy tree roots, discovering hidden paths that crumble beneath your feet to reach extra items, and facing down the bow in their natural habitat, I won't soon forget it. It is my favourite area aesthetically, but gameplay-wise, nothing holds a candle to... At number 1, we have Worship's Rise, the first area of the game. Wuchang may have had some amazing areas as you progress, but just like FromSoft's Bloodborne, I don't think there's anything that comes close to the level of interconnectivity and exploration as the opening village Worship's Rise. At the start, you only have one way you can go, up to the Buddha Cliffs, which leads to the temple where the bandit leader Dutanga is holing up. But from the moment you reach the Shu Sanctum Temple, Worship's Rise opens up with so many different street paths to take. You can find a hidden cave containing the storyteller and the panda merchant, as well as a path leading to the burned down entrance of Doomwillow Beach. You can explore the town itself, which is split into multiple halves, each with their own enemies and paths to go down. You'll be able to find your way back to the Reverend Temple, where the game began, by following gorgeous dirt pathways, which also branch off into the upper village and extra houses in the lower village where you can meet NPCs. In the upper half, you get to explore across rooftops and through various townhouses, killing a scarecrow-looking man that allows you to also get to the optional Annelum area, the extra boss Liu Hongliu, and a few difficult encounters on the cliffside pathways leading upwards. There are shortcuts galore in the Rise, tree trunks to connect you to the Sanctum, gates that can only be opened from one side. It is your standard fare, but no matter where you go, you are always finding something fun to explore, see, and do, items, enemies, and bosses. I wouldn't be shocked if most players missed at least one or two things in Worship's Rise on a first visit because it's so easy to miss a side path and not experience everything the zone has to offer. But what I love is that because the village is nestled in this little valley, you can see everything. You can look around and spot exactly where you came from, or make a note of a location you want to get to, and you're likely able to go there. The scope is surprisingly subdued, but that works in Worship's Rise's favour. In comparison, the Cloudspire Outskirts were a lot more vast, despite having a lot of the same interconnectivity, and that made the area hit a little less as a result. Meanwhile, you really feel like you map out and understand this condensed little town, to where the level design becomes ingrained in your mind. And that makes the later version of the area, where it's all in ruins, hit that much harder, because you've built up that knowledge and know how to use it at that point. Some people will say Wuchang's best area being its first is a bad thing, but I don't think there's anything wrong with putting your best foot forwards at the start of a game to capture people's interests. The fact that Wuchang keeps this quality of level design up for a majority of its run is a true testament to the developers understanding what makes interconnectivity work. It was a genuine pleasure to experience these areas, and I hope more Souls-like developers lean into this style again, because if I really feel like I connect with your level design, it'll make me far more likely to replay your game in the future. But that's just my opinion. What about you guys? Let me know in the comments down below, and be sure to parry that subscribe button to stay up to date on all my future videos. Almost at 40,000 subscribers. I'm so excited. I know we're gonna reach it soon. So cool. Shout out to my channel members for supporting me for another month. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much. I know content has been a bit sparse there lately, but I genuinely appreciate it. And if you want to follow me, I've got Blue Sky, I've got Twitch, and I stream here on YouTube weekly, so come say hi. Thanks for watching, I'll see you next time, adios.